So the Steam Deck did not ship with an instruction manual. What's that all about? Well, I'm sure there's some kind of instruction manual somewhere on Valve's website, but, you know, nobody reads the instruction manual anyway, and they knew that. So here's a list of 10 things that you probably should know that probably should have been in that instruction manual. Let's get into it. So right off the top, charging. The Steam Deck comes with a USB-C charger with a wall wart that plugs directly into the wall. The cord, unfortunately, is not removable. You can't swap the cord out for a longer USB-C cord or something, which is kind of a shame because the cord is not the longest in the world and you may want to have a longer cord, which may tempt you to just plug the Steam Deck into some other USB wall wart that you have kicking around. So, you know, we all have tons of those phone bricks and that sort of thing, and you'd probably be tempted to just plug a longer USB cord into one of those and carry on. I know I did when I first got it. I started downloading everything, and that's the first thing I did. I plugged it into a longer cord so that I'd have a little bit more freedom to move around. Well, unfortunately, the power requirements of the Steam Deck are quite high. The included charger is a 45-watt charger, and that's on the high side when it comes to comparing it to things like Android and iPhone chargers. Most of those put out 8 to 10 to 12 watts. Some of the fast chargers might put out 20 watts or something. But for the most part, none of your normal devices like tablet and phone chargers that you have kicking around the house are going to put out 45 watts. With the phone charger that I used, it actually depleted the battery while charging. It just couldn't keep up to the demands of the downloading and all the things that I was doing on the Steam Deck, so it actually lost battery to the point where it was almost dead within the first couple of hours. So when I switched back over to the official power brick, it actually charged up quite quickly. So that's tip number 1. Use the official charger or find something better than what you have kicking around the house. Getting into tip number 2. Everybody's talking about the fact that the Steam Deck has a desktop mode. Where is this desktop mode? When you turn on the computer, you're looking around, you push the Steam button, you push a couple of different buttons. Well, you might not know that you have to long press the power button on the top of the console here, and you will get a pop-up that gives you several options, including your power and sleep options, and then a button to switch to desktop version. When you switch to the desktop, there is where you're going to be able to do things like install emulators and install things like media players like VLC or music players. That's where you're going to be able to interact with things like your downloaded files. For example, if you put music or movies or audiobooks or any other kind of media files, that's where you're going to interact with them, not through the SteamOS, but through the Linux desktop. Moving on to tip number 3, improving battery life is really something that everyone is concerned with this first model of the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is a fantastic device, but it seems like the number 1 complaint about the Steam Deck is the battery life. What you want to do is press we call this the menu button down here with the 3 little dots, and when you press the menu button, it brings up a performance window, you've probably noticed, and you want to go into that performance window, and the first thing you see here is frame rate limit. Now, some of you may be frames per second snobs and you want the absolute best performance that you can get, but if you want to maximize battery life, one of the best things that you can do is cap your game at 30 frames a second. That allows the CPU to run at a lower wattage and consume less battery. For certain types of games like visual novels and stuff that don't have a lot of action on the screen, you could even cap your frame rate as low as 15 frames a second, which you might think, oh my god, that's terrible. But, you know, depending on the style of game, if you're playing, you know, a puzzle game or something, I was actually just playing Evergarden last night, which is a little indie game that relies on touchscreen controls, and that would be completely fine at 15 frames per second if you were looking to maximize battery life. Tip number 4, the graphics overlay. One of the first things you see when you step into that menu button here is this little spot right here, which says graphics or performance overlay level. And it's not readily apparent what that is. It's got 4 different steps, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And in those 4 steps, you get 4 different levels of information overlaid over your screen. And that is really a useful tool when you're fine-tuning your games for performance. PC games and gaming on the Steam Deck is not just like a console where you pop in a cartridge into your Switch and it just plays. You need to do a little bit of fine-tuning in order to get the best results on a game-by-game basis. Here's another hot tip that Steam will not tell you. There are a lot of functions on this device that can be achieved just by keyboard shortcuts. And how do you figure those out? You have to long press the Steam button, and then it will bring up a list here of all the different shortcuts that you can do. There are other things you can do here, for example, like turning your right thumbstick into a mouse click, holding the Steam key and pressing X. That brings up the keyboard, the on-screen keyboard. Plenty of different shortcuts here that will help streamline your experience on the Steam Deck. Next one here to talk about is Steam Points. You may have noticed when you paid for your device, if you are not really familiar with the Steam ecosystem, you got a whole bunch of points, maybe 50,000 or 70,000 points when you purchased your Steam Deck, and you're thinking, okay, what can I do with these points? Well, what you can do, and I would recommend that you wait until you actually get your Steam Deck in your hands, because you're going to be able to purchase some aesthetic items for your Steam Deck. You can get custom keyboards that are cool colors, you can get profile icons, all kinds of backgrounds, themes, things like that, that are going to customize your Steam Deck experience. And quite frankly, for the price of things in the Point Store, you're going to be able to get a lot of stuff for your Steam Deck purchase. Have a little fun with your new Steam Deck, customize it as you will. Storage is an interesting issue. For number 7 on our list, you can upgrade the storage of your Steam Deck in a couple of different ways. So the Steam Deck comes from factory with 3 different flavors: a 64 gig eMMC memory, a 256 gig SSD M2 memory, or a 512 SSD M2. This comes with an SD card slot that can take up to probably beyond a 1 terabyte SD card. And most of the games in testing in the community, people have found that most of the games run just as well off of the SD card. You don't necessarily need to spend big money on the 1 terabyte SD card. You could buy 2 or 3 256 or 512 SD cards and hot swap them out. For example, put your indie games on one and put your AAA games on another, so you don't necessarily need to go out and spend that maybe $175 or $180 on a 1 terabyte SD card right off the bat. It's often better to grow with your device rather than give yourself so much headroom. So maybe pick up a 256 now and maybe pick up a 512 in a few months when the 256 is full. That's kind of what I would recommend. And then the SSD itself, assuming you have an SSD, the onboard memory in the Steam Deck can be upgraded. I won't say easily, but if you have even a little bit of technical skill, you should be able to follow one of many YouTube tutorials that will show you how to upgrade the SSD in your Steam Deck, and you can purchase an M2 SSD for fairly cheap on Amazon or eBay, and it's just a matter of something like 8 or 10 screws that you have to unscrew, disconnect the battery, plug in the new SSD, reconnect the battery, put those 8 or 10 screws back in. It's a fairly simple process. If you're still on the fence about which Steam Deck to purchase, I would probably suggest purchasing the cheapest one, because in every other way it's just as capable as the more expensive one. Number 8, where do I get into those Proton settings that everyone's talking about to adjust settings for a game that it's maybe not supposed to be compatible and get it to run? For example, Persona 4 Golden is completely unsupported as far as Steam is concerned, but the community has found that Persona Golden runs perfectly well under Proton Experimental. Well, how do I get to those settings? Well, what you need to do is you need to go to the game's homepage. In Steam, the games have their own page. So you launch into the game, and here's the page for the game, and you're going to see run game, and then over here there are controller options for changing your controllers, and then there is a gear over here, and this is where you're going to get into the different settings for the system. You move down to properties, and in properties you're going to see launch options and things like that. If you go over to compatibility here, you'll see compatibility, force the use of a specific Steam Play compatibility tool, and that's where you want to choose from the various Proton options that are here. So you go out to the community, you find out what has been working best for people on something like a Reddit thread or a forum of some kind, ask a question on a Facebook group or something, and then you come in here and choose your compatibility layer. So just remember, anytime you want to work on any of the settings for a game specifically, you want to go to that game's homepage, go to the gear, that's where you're going to find those settings. And moving on to number 9, how do you get those rear buttons to work? From factory, those buttons don't seem to do anything. Now, maybe I want those buttons to do something in a game specifically, or maybe I want those changes to be system-wide. How do I get into the settings to get those back additional buttons to do something that I want them to do, to program them to be the same as the face buttons, for example, or to program them to be like cursors, or there's so many different things that you could do with those 4 buttons, but it's not really apparent how you go about changing them. What you want to do is push the Steam button and right on the D-pad twice, and that brings you into a whole series of menus and prompts that will allow you to set up your hotkeys however you want them. It's as simple as clicking on the gear and choosing from dozens of different options, whether it be a keyboard, like a keybind, like choosing a letter, an F key, something like that, or whether you want to use one of the face buttons or controller options, D-pad. You can really customize those buttons to be anything that you want. And number 10, managing storage. It's not necessarily apparent right off the bat where you go to view what you have installed where and that sort of thing. Again, it's under that magical Steam button. You go to that Steam button, you scroll down to the bottom, you hit something that says storage, you get into an app, and this is where, if you have an SD card installed, you're going to be able to view all the games that you have installed. You're going to be able to move those games by pressing Y. You're going to be able to delete games and things like that. That's where you manage that. Hitting that Steam button, we come all the way down to settings. We come all the way down to storage, and that's where you're going to be able to manage that stuff. So you can see here I have the 512 gig SSD, and then I have a 256 gig SD card, and I can move these things around however I want. If I want to take Persona 4 Golden off of the SSD and move it onto the SD card, it's as simple as that. And that brings us to what I said before about having perhaps multiple SD cards. If you want to create almost physical copies of your games, you can absolutely do that and create a library of SD cards. So, it's much cheaper to go out and buy a smaller SD card when you factor in price per gigabyte. So something like a 256 SD card, if you were to pick up, say, 4 of those and put a bunch of games on one, move them to that SD card, then remove the SD card, put another one in, move some more to it, download more, whatever. That's really what I would recommend at this point in time, rather than spending another, say, $150 to $200 on a 1 terabyte SD card. I would buy 4 256s and work that way. And you know, I've actually seen somebody interesting online who's been creating physical games with SD cards, with really small SD cards like 16 gigs or whatever, or 32 gig cards, where they will actually download one specific game to the SD card and then you know, make up a tiny little label for it and everything, and that would be you know, Cyberpunk 2077 physical PC version. You know, whatever game is your favorite. You can hook up through the USB-C port a portable hard drive and actually like plug in like a 3 terabyte or 4 terabyte hard drive and actually stick it to the back of the unit if you wanted to with some Velcro or something. Personally, I think that's kind of bulky, and I really wouldn't do that, because anything extra like that kind of defeats the purpose of having a portable handheld device. This device is already big and bulky enough as it is. Let me know down in the comments what some of your favorite hot tips are for the Steam Deck, because this device is still pretty new and we're all just discovering stuff day by day by day. And of course, Steam is updating constantly and adding new functionality to this device every single day. So let me know down in the comments, what are some of your favorite features and functions of the Steam Deck? Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Stay classy.